Manchester Airport, early morning of August 22, 1985. It was the peak of the British summer holiday season. The airport was busy and hordes of passengers were arriving for their flights ready to be whisked off for some sunshine. Among them, there were 129 passengers and 2 infants traveling to Corfu on British Airtours, British Airways charter subsidiary flight KT-28M. There was an air of excitement as passengers began to board the flight a little after 6:30 in the morning. The crew was on hand in the cabin welcoming passengers and helping them to their seats and stowing away luggage. Before long, everyone was on board, doors were closed, and the obligatory safety demonstration was completed. The crew prepared the cabin and sat down, ready for takeoff, as the aircraft headed out towards Manchester's runway 24. And the flight 28M began its takeoff route. Initially, all seemed normally as the 737 hurtled down the runway. Just 12 seconds later, a loud thumping noise startled everyone on board. In the flight deck, Captain Turrington and First Officer Love initially believed a tire had burst. A rejected takeoff was initiated and the pilots slowed the aircraft down using reverse thrust and limited braking in an attempt not to damage any more tires. However, this was no burst tire. Passengers seated on the left-hand side of the aircraft had a clear view of flames pouring from the number 1 engine and immediately began to panic. The pilots decided to turn the aircraft off the runway onto an adjacent taxiway, allowing them to further assess the situation. Sadly, this made matters worse as they were now facing the prevailing winds which fanned the flames over the fuselage, igniting more fuel that had spilled out to the aircraft's skin. Turrington was in the process of speaking to the tower when the fire warning bell on number 1 engine sounded, relaying this information to ATC. The tower confirmed there was a lot of fire and that they should commence an evacuation using the starboard side. The aircraft turned off the runway onto a short taxiway called Link D and came to a full stop facing northwest. Evacuation efforts began immediately, but several difficulties were encountered. The purser, who was the crew's senior flight attendant, tried to open the right front exit door about 10 seconds before the aircraft stopped, but it jammed due to a design fault in the emergency slide system and he abandoned attempt to open it. After about 25 seconds, the purser opened the left front door and successfully deployed the escape slide. At this time, the first 2 fire engines arrived. One began showering the fuselage and the open door with foam to prevent the fire from spreading to the door and the slide as passengers were evacuating, and to provide cooling to protect the passengers still inside. When the second fire engine arrived, the first concentrated on the burning jet fuel and the left engine. The second sprayed foam over the fuselage and the open door. During this time, the number 4 stewardess Johanna Toff had kept passengers out of the forward galley area to allow the purser time to open a door. When the left side door was opened, exiting passengers jammed themselves in the narrow 57 cm wide passageway between 2 forward galley bulkheads. Toff bodily pulled the passengers out one at a time until she cleared the jam. Meanwhile, the purser had resumed working on the right front door and he successfully opened the door fully and deployed the escape slide. About 1 minute after the plane had stopped, 16 passengers and Toff escaped through the left front door, one of whom was unconscious and Toff dragged her out. The purser and 34 passengers made their escape through the right front door. More difficulties were encountered at the overwing exits. The left overwing exit was blocked by smoke and flames. The passenger seated at the right overwing exit had difficulty understanding how to operate the hatch. At that time, there was no requirement that exit row passengers receive a briefing on how to open the hatch. Once the 22-kilogram hatch was released, it fell inward onto the passengers seated next to it. 2 passengers lifted the hatch and pulled it on a seat into the next row back, making the exit available for use 45 seconds after the aircraft had stopped. Once the hatch had been removed, passengers still encountered difficulties in getting to and using the exits. The exit row seated allowed only 27 cm to pass through. The armrests between those seats remained down, and the exit was directly over a seat, requiring passengers to maneuver awkwardly to escape. Passengers in the rear of the aircraft were panicking as smoke and eventually flames filled the whole cabin. At about the same time, the right overwing exit was opened. Passengers crawled over seat backs to get to the right overwing exits as well as the two front exits. Some survivors told investigators that the aisle had become blocked with bodies. This caused jamming at all exits, and the seat over which the overwing exit was located failed in such a way that the seat back collapsed forward, causing a further obstruction. A man who had been seated in 16C was found dead, lying across the exit, and investigators were unsure whether the seat back collapse had trapped him. A 14-year-old boy was found lying across the top of the man from seat 16C by firefighters 5.5 minutes after the aircraft had stopped. He was alive, suffering only superficial burns to his hands. He was the last of 27 survivors to escape through that exit, and the last evacuee to survive the accident. The subsequent investigation into this incident said that the number 9 combustor can on the port engine ruptured, and a section of the can was ejected forcibly into an under-wing fuel tank access panel. That panel was fractured, allowing fuel to spill onto hot combustion gases from the engine. The resulting fire developed catastrophically primarily due to the orientation of the aircraft and the fire to the wind, even though the wind was light. The AAIB concluded that the major cause of the fatalities was rapid incapacitation due to the inhalation of the dense toxic irritant smoke atmosphere within the cabin, aggravated by evacuation delays caused by a forward right door malfunction and restricted access to the exits.